Hey everybody, David here from Team Powerhouse, the PowerCast. It is Tuesday night, it is 5 o'clock, and do we have a special guest for you? First question is, are we live? Are we on Instagram? Are we on Facebook? Are we on YouTube? That's what I want to know, and that's what I want to see, because we're excited to be here with you guys. I have a very special guest. Her name is Tiffany Katz. If you're not watching us now on Instagram, if you're not on YouTube or on Facebook, get on. It's the best way to get us. Also Twitch. YouTube, Team Powerhouse Real Estate. Hold on 1 second. On YouTube, Team Powerhouse Real Estate, hit subscribe. If you're going to be on the Instagram, Team Powerhouse Real Estate, we have TikTok. We have many different outlets for people to come and see you there, Tiffany. All right, everybody. So Eric is back home or in the car. Eric, where are you? In the car?
Yes.
All right, thank you so much for joining us today. Eric's been running around, very busy, joining the show with us over here today. So I have Tiffany Katz, she's from TMK Consulting.
Good evening, David. How are you?
Good evening. So what does it mean, TMK Consulting?
Well, it's actually just my initials. Tiffany M. for Michelle Katz Consulting.
I love it. Now, how long have you been doing this type of work?
I was a special ed teacher here in Connecticut for over 10 years, and I decided it was time to go to the other side of the table, as we call it, and I left the classroom to move into advocacy.
Fantastic. That's very cool. This is a very, I'll call it sensitive subject, something that is going to be very important for people to learn and understand about, because sometimes parents don't know if they have a child that's special needs. Sometimes a parent doesn't know what special needs is and what avenues they have for themselves. And there's a lot of things we're going to cover today. Now, we have an iPad in front of us. It's a little delayed as you're watching it over here, I think. So don't focus on this. We're doing this right here. In the meantime, let me talk about you and what you do, okay? So for the people out there who are watching, if you have a child, at what ages do you work with, by the way? When it comes to special
I
needs?
start with children as young as about 3 years old, which is when you transition from the Birth to 3 program into the public school system.
Interesting, very interesting. So you're saying that people can start to identify that their child may have a special need, and a special need could be a listening, could be actions. What kind of things would they be looking for in a child at this age?
Well, babies, it's all about their developmental growth.
Okay.
Not walking, not talking, not making eye contact, not doing the simple things like waving or clapping,
Interesting.
not speaking early enough, speech skills, not using their hands, their muscles. And that is usually referred to the Birth to 3 program in the state of Connecticut.
So you'd be at your pediatrician, probably.
Yes.
And they would say to you, you know what, it's possible your child has a special needs or something that we
And they
need
would
to-
refer you to the Birth to 3 program.
Okay.
Give you that information. And then Birth to 3 would come to your home and do
Yes.
evaluations.
Yes.
And provide whatever services were necessary.
All right, do me a favor, come a little closer to the table. I want people to be able to see you out there in the public. I want her to know this face and this smile, the person she is, because they're gonna have questions for you at some point in the future. And they could be watching this show right now, have questions for us, where Jonathan is paying attention. So if anybody has questions on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, please don't hesitate to reach out. And it's important to ask the questions about this kind of subject, right?
Yes.
How do you learn about something like this if you don't have someone that's in front of you talking about it, right? So it can be 0 to 3 at the earliest stages, and then it goes on from...
At 3 years old, the public school becomes responsible for educating your child
Oh, wow, 3 years old.
with special needs. And they take over for Birth to 3. Birth to 3 will send you to the public school, they'll refer you to them, and they will hold what they call a PPT meeting to discuss your child's eligibility and any other future evaluations or things they want to do, and then provide services from there.
Very interesting. Okay, so let's start with, where is your office?
Well, my office is located in Orange, Connecticut, but I am all over the state.
So you work the whole state of Connecticut. That's
Yep.
fantastic.
And I've even with remote been able to work a little bit in Rhode Island.
That's fantastic. You know, I don't know how many people do what you do, but I bet you that people don't know to reach out to you. So let's make sure that Jonathan has your contact information online available for people to see. Jonathan, I'm not sure if you have in hand her cell number. You want to just please, is that the best way to contact you?
Yes,
Cell number? All right.
absolutely.
What is Tiffany's cell number, please?
203-887-3996.
So Jonathan's got your information up on the screen
Yes.
for people to reach out to you. Excellent. So you work all over the state. It starts from 0 to 3. They start to notice these kind of things which could be available. But sometimes kids don't notice at this young age.
Correct.
You don't find out until they're in school already.
Yes,
And they're
correct.
having maybe some troubles in different classrooms or different subjects. It doesn't mean that they're across the board having problems necessarily, right?
Correct.
Are there any subjects in school that you find that trigger this learning disability or something along the lines of a disability? And it's not just learning disabilities. We have other avenues and facets of what you cover too. So we'll just
Yes.
get into that in a minute.
Usually, it comes out a lot in learning to read, learning math basic skills, handwriting, depending upon what the disability is.
Okay.
Learning disabilities often are not diagnosed until an older age because it comes with disabilities of learning within the classroom setting.
I will say to you that I've from firsthand use myself and people in the family that I know and many other families that I know who have kids with a learning disability or some kind of disability across the board typically find out later, not as early as the 0 to 3 unless it's very physically visual with a child, correct?
Correct.
All right.
Correct.
So,
Although those on the autism spectrum, which is a
Okay.
lot of families I work with,
Yes.
they tend to know very, very young.
okay, so let's go into autism. So autism is a very wide spectrum of autism.
Correct.
And again, I'm not very knowledgeable in autism. I'm learning slowly. And it's a very interesting field because someone can be autistic and probably smarter than I am or anybody else.
That is correct.
And they also can be having functional disabilities mentally and physically.
Correct.
So when it comes to autism, and listen, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, so when I say smarter than me, I mean smarter than smarter people. So let me just make sure I make that clear. But no, autism is definitely something that is a very unique disability because it could be something like you just said, it can be found very early in age based on their conditions, their eye-hand movements, what they're doing, and it can be something that they find later on in their conversation. It could be something their skill writing, reading, understanding, right?
Usually autism, because it's so behaviorally based,
Yeah.
it is known much, much younger because it's about transitioning, being able to handle different stimuli, sensory things. So autism tends to be diagnosed at a much younger age
Interesting.
than other
Learning
disabilities.
disabilities. All right.
Autism also is usually is diagnosed by medical doctors.
Okay.
Schools can test for autism and say things look like autism, but usually a doctor actually diagnoses
That
it.
makes a lot of sense and good to know for the people out there as well. Again, if you're listening out there, if you know somebody, friend or family, that has some kind of learning disability, a child, parent, somebody you know that may have questions about this kind of stuff, maybe that they have a child that they're not sure or maybe they're concerned about that has some kind of, it could be a child who's getting into trouble. How about a person who's getting in trouble a lot at home, not listening to their parents, not because they're not smart enough, because they're just behaving poorly. Would that be a disability?
It can be. The way it works, it's like everything else, to be diagnosed with a school-based disability, there's a whole process for that. And so schools will first try and give children services to remediate without going into special education. And if that is not successful, then they will evaluate, mostly with a big push from the parents.
Yes.
But they will evaluate for learning disabled, disabilities, attention disorders, behavioral disabilities. And from that testing, you formulate an IEP if the child qualifies. And in that IEP, you have to pick a designated label.
All right, we're jumping a little bit ahead for
Yes.
1 second because this is very deep, a lot of information over here. Eric, if you want to jump at any point over here, please don't hesitate. Eric is again not sitting in the studio with us. He is live with us. He's in a vehicle parked on the side of the road, not driving.
I hope not.
Because he's very safe. Go, Eric.
I did. Well, I have some questions, but you haven't quite gotten
The
to
part?
the actual academic part of it. So
Okay. Well, let's go into that then. I'm happy you asked that, Eric. So, how does a family get in touch with you, first of all?
A family can get in touch with me via email, via telephone, and you just give me a call and we chat from there.
But before that part, which is the easy part for us here, their child has a disability or there's a problem, they're in school. Does the school say, hey, listen, I know a great young lady, her name is Tiffany Katz. You should reach out to her and let her do some testing with you or help you get special programming available. Do schools like to do that, or are they kind of like, not looking for that?
Not usually. First off, if a school recommends me, usually they have to pay the bill.
Okay.
And I am paid by the parents. I
Okay.
work for the families, not for the schools or the
You're
school
the
systems.
so you're the advocate for the parent to make sure the school
Is-
is providing the services the kids need.
Correct.
Because the school is going to cost the school money
Correct.
in order to bring the people in, the professionals.
Exactly.
So they don't always necessarily are looking out for your child's best interest. We hate to think that, but then they're maybe not going to go out on a limb and say, hey, we need to bring somebody special in for this child here because this child needs services. Is what you're saying to me.
Absolutely.
Okay, so important to know, if you think your child may have some kind of disability or limited disability, and they're going to a public or private school, it doesn't matter, right?
It slightly matters. The process is a bit different,
Okay.
but there is a process for both private schools and public schools.
Before we touch on that also, can you explain to me what IDEA is, please?
Okay. IDEA stands for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That is the law that governs special ed worldwide. And that is a federal law.
Protective service for kids to make sure that they have the ability to get educated.
Yes, and that is a series of laws that make up special ed law.
Okay, that's
And
very important to know about.
Each state takes those laws and they implement them the way that they hear them or they want to implement them.
That doesn't mean it's necessarily how we want them to be
Correct.
implemented. So
They're a
that's
bit
why-
ambiguous to give school
Money.
districts the opportunity to use them how they want to, but they are
Available.
legal laws.
And there are also legal services that are available to kids. Because listen, many kinds of families, no matter where you come from, no matter what language you speak, no matter what your background is, can have a child with some kind of disability.
Absolutely.
And it's probably more understood today than ever before. I remember when I was a kid, the word learning disability was not a conversation piece that ever came up in school. You were probably somebody who got in trouble because you didn't get things, didn't get good grades, and you got in
Class
trouble at home
clown.
because you're could be a class clown, and even today, the kids who sometimes don't understand are class clowns. So this is where I'm kind of thinking about like families and people and kids. So let's talk about the different kind of services you provide, for example, of different elements.
So I provide the service of really being a support for the parents. I go with them to the PPTs. I read through all the different paperwork. I make sure how many hours their child's getting in service. Are they getting enough hours? If not, I help the parents advocate in the meeting to get more hours. Anybody who sat through a PPT meeting can tell you it is an extraordinarily intimidating experience.
What I can say to you from going through sitting at the PPT meetings, you sit there and you like have like you're just kind of confused. It's overwhelming. So,
It's educational, it's a whole room filled with educational professionals, school psychologists,
Yeah.
teachers, principals, administrators, and it's very overwhelming, and they speak in a language of special ed, which you just spoke beautifully, the word IDA. They will never spell out the term, they just say IDA as though everybody at the table knows.
as a matter of fact, it's IDEA.
IDE, yes.
And when you say it sounds like IDA, and on
Right.
night when you sit down at the table listening to people talk about it, you're just hearing like wah wah wah. It's tough. I'll tell you because you, as a parent, care so much about your kids, and all you want is them to succeed and do well. And I know when I sat down before the table, I've had like whether it was reading or math or whatever the issue was with a child, that they genuinely cared about the child once they found that there was a learning disability. and they really try to make efforts now. And I'm sure the different schools you go to, depending where they are, may have better or worse, people that want to put that effort into it.
Yes, but when you sit at these meetings, it's very overwhelming for families, and I am the person that sits there and I ask the questions. You also have the emotional component. There is nothing more emotional than a group of adults talking about your child and most likely their weaknesses, their struggles, and it's really hard to hear as a parent.
You you feel talking badly about your child that they're not smart enough for this information.
And you become very defensive, and so sometimes you forget to advocate, or in a lot of cases, parents don't know. If you tell me as the teacher my child needs an hour of reading, they don't know they can say, well, what about 2 hours?
Right, or 3 hours, or whatever it needs to be done.
Why 1 hour? They don't know that. And so that's where I come in, because I am not emotionally attached in the same way, obviously, a mom or a dad is to their child.
Right.
So I do all of that.
You're a representative for the family and the child to make sure they're going to get as much advocacy, education, and special support that they can get.
Yes.
So let's talk about the different kinds of services you work with. You work with ADD.
I work with basically any child who has any kind of learning disorder, or is speculated to, from ADD to executive functioning disabilities, learning disabilities, children who are cognitively disabled, autistic.
What does cognitively disabled mean?
Well, the term cognitively disabled is the now term we use. To be really politically incorrect,
Just tell me what it really is, because
that term used to be intellectually disabled, or before that, mentally retarded.
which really isn't what it is.
It means that your IQ is below, I believe it's about 70. If you have an IQ below 70, you are considered cognitively disabled.
Which doesn't mean anything more than the fact that you need help to get by, to understand information, and have to learn new processes to take information and process it so you understand something. They do work, right?
Correct.
That's very interesting stuff. So we have...
And then, of course, there's behaviorally disabled kids, which is, your children that have psychological disabilities.
What's a psychological disability, if it's okay to ask that question?
It could be, usually they're behavioral, schizophrenic, those kind of disabilities that are affecting your child's ability to learn.
Okay.
That's what the document is.
Okay.
It's any disability that is making it hard, it is blocking your child from being able to learn appropriately in the classroom. It's affecting their academic performance.
Okay. And the age groups you work with typically are more in the line of like elementary, junior high, middle school, high schoolers?
Usually, it's about preschool through 24.
Oh, wow.
Public schools are mandated, I don't know off the top of my head, it's either 22, 23, or 24, but they are mandated to educate children into their 20s.
So you could be also getting special help in college as well?
Well, it's not in college.
Okay.
The children that don't graduate high school at 17, 18 years old after their senior year, because they're not going off to traditional college, they stay within what the school districts call a transition program.
Okay.
And they vary greatly from one school to another.
So what you're saying is basically they have another school after high school for people over the age of 17 or 18 that may have graduated but still really need help.
That are not ready to be off in the world.
Would they have graduated high school, technically speaking, or no?
Yes, they graduate, but they don't technically get a diploma.
Okay.
Because they're part of this transition program.
What's the program called?
Every district does it differently.
Can you give an example that's in Cheshire, Wallingford, North Haven?
Cheshire,
Orange,
for example,
Woodbridge?
their transition program is affiliated with Quinnipiac.
Oh, pretty cool.
And so they do programming. I don't know exactly how it works, but they do some programming for kids that are able to handle that. with Quinnipiac.
That's
So
pretty
maybe they
amazing.
take assisted classes, or depending on the level of the child's disability, some of them are transition programs that teach kids to bag groceries in the grocery store, or to live, semi-independently.
I'm not familiar. I didn't know this existed. It's very impressive information. Eric, did you know much about this at all?
Yes.
You did. What part
Yes.
did you know about? Because help me out over here. What did you?
About the spectrum, about the types of special needs, the education aspect, the fact that Cheshire's partnered with Quinnipiac. But I did have a question, Tiffany. You had mentioned that there was an IQ kind of threshold of 70.
Yes.
If the child scores over 70, do they lose the ability for some of the services available?
No, not at all. So the services
Okay.
that a school provides are based, are not driven by that label that the school gives your child. So on their individual education plan, which is the document that gets filled out when your child qualifies for special ed, there is a selection of disabilities. They must qualify under one of those disabilities, at least one. So but that disability should never, ever, ever drive their program, ever. And if any school district tries to drive their program by it, that is not okay. Labels should never drive program.
Interesting.
And so intellectually disabled is just one, or cognitively disabled is just one of those labels that they can check the box off. And one of the requirements for that box is a certain IQ. But they can have a child with a learning disability. Part of that profile is that they have an average to above average IQ, but they're not performing at the same level as their IQ.
Very interesting stuff. Eric, you still there, buddy?
I am, yes.
Okay.
It's because of the sunroof that I don't have any true light.
Okay.
Tiffany?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
So, as I understand what you were saying before, is the federal government kind of mandates the educational aspect of it, and then the states take their own interpretation of these, and they handle it accordingly.
Correct. And then each district takes their interpretation of what the state interpreted.
Wow.
So
it can get severely watered down by the time it gets to a particular school district.
correct. And one of the things, which is, what I was sharing with Dave, is that, and Eric, is that when you, as a family, in your business, when you have families that are looking to relocate for whatever reason, is that with that, each district interpreting it themselves, every district is really different. And often a parent, yes, we can all go on the websites and look up which school district's #1 in the state of Connecticut. But when you look at that number, it doesn't take into account anything to do with special ed. It's a SAT
Right.
score, STAR testing, all of that mastery testing type stuff, who goes where to college, but it doesn't have anything to do with that. And if you have a child who is on the spectrum or has disabilities, it's very hard to know, well, just because a school has a really high rating doesn't mean it's necessarily got the best programming for your specific child.
Right.
It's very interesting, Eric, because one of the biggest things people always ask about the school ratings. And you know what? I don't know if people realize or know that just because a rating is high in a school, that means that their child, if they have a disability, is going to find success there. And that leads us back to you, Tiffany. When a child has learned, or a parent is thinking they have a child with a learning disability, or the school thinks that they may have one, it's so important for somebody as a parent to have someone like you in their corner to call you up and say, listen, we think our child has a learning disability, or our child does have a learning disability. We need to make sure we get as much out of the system as possible to help make sure our kid gets as much help and time they need and the services that are available to them as a parent and as a child so they can be truly successful. You know, as a kid growing up, the last thing you want to do is be an outsider around your friends, to be different, to feel different mentally or physically. And having this kind of help, you know, maybe it's a little more time to read, longer test taking, to help them feel more secure emotionally or physically, can be tremendous to them in their lifelong future because of their emotional and mental confidence. That's the word, confidence. So tell us a little bit about what is a 504. You also work with students who have a 504.
So a 504, that is actually the number that represents the statute in the law. It's actually a law that works around students who have medical disabilities or physical disabilities.
Okay.
So, and that is the 504 is the document that they can get. So if you don't qualify for special education, but are still can qualify for some accommodations based on a medical disability. So you have to have a documented disability from a medical doctor. And that could be anything from a child with diabetes who, you know, has some medical things that are affecting their ability to learn. It could be a child who was born missing a limb. So for example, a child who doesn't have their legs could have a 504 to give them accommodations in the gym class so that they're not, you know, had points taken off or whatever for not being able to.
Can you give us a real
run
example,
into.
just for, if you don't mind me asking, because, you know, God forbid the extreme cases, but what would be an example you've dealt with the 504?
ADD, ADHD are medical disabilities. So
Oh,
there
really?
are some children who, the IEP gives you a physical service, a speech and language service, a time with a resource teacher, occupational therapy. That an IEP is about physical service. A 504 is about accommodations and modifications. So it's any disability where a kid can be successful in the classroom with modifications and accommodations and not a direct service.
It's amazing.
So someone who has migraines, or a child who has, you know, many of psychological issues, a child who's been out of school for a while because they've had mono or they've had some kind of medical car accident trauma in their life. It can be more temporary or it can be, you know, a lifelong type thing. You know, every school in their interpretation offers different options for special needs kids, and just because one offers it doesn't mean another one does. Some schools have contained classrooms for special needs kids where they're just special needs kids. Some do, you know, different varieties of programming, and so it's important to ask those questions. As far as to your families, I would highly recommend they visit the schools, they talk to the special ed directors, they ask as many questions as they can. Facebook is a wealth of knowledge too. Almost every town has a parent special ed page
Oh, that's good to know.
on
Eric,
Facebook.
can you hear us still, by the way, please?
I'm here.
Okay, buddy.
They can go on to, you know, the Orange Moms Special Ed Facebook page and ask those questions.
Or Cheshire, or North Haven,
All,
or
right,
Wallingford.
correct.
Got
Almost
it.
all
Or any
towns have
towns,
it.
Fairfield, Hartford, West Hartford, and we work all over the states, and just
Right.
around different
Yeah,
towns.
no,
so we can-
almost every town has one. If they don't, you know, they may call it the SEPTO page, which is the Special Ed
How does a
PTA.
parent know even to look that up on Facebook? I mean, you just type in, special ed.
Special Ed Fairfield, Connecticut, or, you know, you put in, also for families looking to move, there are some communities that are much more welcoming to children, especially on the autism spectrum. They have a lot of, you know, youth programming for them, whether
Would you be
it's
comfortable mentioning in those areas?
Watertown is phenomenal. They have a wonderful program up there for kids on the spectrum, and they have, you
For
know,
autism?
yes,
anything.
autism spectrum. They have, I mean, they take other kids, but they have
What are the towns?
a basketball program, they have a soccer program, they have a swim program, and they have a really nice community of families that they do a lot of wonderful stuff.
Very interesting.
Fairfield has some stuff. The town of Fairfield has a support group. North Haven has a support group. Different towns have more active or less active support groups, but they are on Facebook. They are available, and when you're moving and that consideration comes in.
So Eric and I, our team, realtors as a whole, we definitely need to be more, how should I say this, informed, and to have the ability for parents to feel comfortable to talk to us as agents about the possibility of their kids who may need some kind of special services, and to help them to find the right places, put them in touch with you. Two things happen. One, they're going to be in a better area for their kids' needs and wants, and number two, help you, for them, advocate for the most services possible. Because realistically, if you don't advocate for yourself, you don't get really what you want and need.
Right. That's just the way it works.
And that's in life and everything you do. You have to advocate. If you don't ask, thou shalt not receive. Right?
Yep.
Let's see. Eric, anything else you want to add over there?
No, sir.
All right. So the best way a parent learns about you, they find out from the school, not as likely. Do you have a website?
I do. It's tmkconsulting.com. We do have a website. I have an active Facebook page that parents can also look onto.
Okay. And let's see what else. What else did the parent learn to find out? Okay, so I made myself some notes to ask you some questions. I'm just reading my notes over here. So walking me through the process, just a quick little roundup from today. You think your child may have a potential learning disability, call up Tiffany Katz. Let her kind of help you. You also probably get the right people to do testing.
Well, usually the school should do the testing, but not everybody knows that they sometimes have to ask the school, or that they as a parent have a right to ask the school to do the testing. And that if they push it, the school will do the testing.
Okay. So they have the ability to do testing outside the school, but the school does provide testing if you ask for it.
Right, you can privately pay for testing, and there's wonderful evaluators out there available to anybody who's, wants to do that.
Number two, once we find out we have a learning disability or some kind of disability across the board, you now go to the school, sit down with the parents, and advocate for them to get them as much service as possible and all the different elements that are needed for that student.
Correct.
Because those students and the parents need that, and you're almost like their attorney, kind of, sort of.
Yes.
You know.
So I play that very fine line.
Very
I am
fine
not
line.
a lawyer. I don't pretend to be one. But I can often work with a family, and sometimes there does get to a point, because this is legal matters, that I will recommend a lawyer if we get to that point, if the child is not successful or needs a placement outside of the public schools.
You would think most of the time the school is going to be on point with you and the parent to work with you. They would never want to be, I'm guessing, like red flagged, would they?
It's not as much red flagged. It's, especially with out of district placements and so forth, they're very expensive. And, the schools doesn't want to have to spend that money if they can come up with a way to do it within their school district. And sometimes, parents in schools do not see eye to eye about what needs to be done. And so it does come to a legal, process. That's what this is.
Right.
And within the process, sometimes a lawyer is necessary.
Hopefully not. Hopefully you find yourself with a great girl like Tiffany Katz to help you get you what you need and want for your kids. We want to thank you so much for being with us today.
It was my pleasure.
I want to apologize to everybody there who's still hopefully watching this show through the technical difficulty we had. We did have some challenges across the board, and I apologize for that. That's what happens when you go live, though. When we go live, things can happen, but you know what? We were out, we find a way to make it happen, and we make it happen for our people watching the show.
Can I add one more thing, please?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Often I'm asked, why would you hire myself as your advocate as opposed to the, 600 others that might come up if you Googled such things?
Good question.
And my answer to everybody out there is because all advocates, like everything else, are different. We at TMK Consulting are big believers in working with families and with schools, developing positive relationships and creating as little animosity, if any, as possible. We want to be team players.
And you want to make sure that the kid is very successful through the program,
Absolutely.
all through school.
Yes.
Listen,
Without creating animosity.
I'm going to tell you something. I know Tiffany for over 20 years.
God,
She's
that's a
one of
long
the
time.
nice, I know, one of the nicest, sweetest people we've ever met.
Thank you.
As a matter of fact, you look at her and you see this sweet, nice person. How could she be a tiger? The truth of the matter is, when it comes to defending your kids and making sure that your kids are well taken care of, she goes to bat for you as if your child is her own. And that means a lot. It's definitely something that is important to have somebody that cares about you, looks out for you, and has been through it possibly themselves to know how to advocate to make sure your kid gets everything they need and want. And that's a big part of the picture. If you've been through it, you know more about it. If you haven't been through it before, it's something that is brand new. It kind of punches you in the stomach, the throat. It kind of takes your breath away. It's your kids. And all you want is for your kids to be successful, happy in life, and be able to fly and just have a great life, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Team Powerhouse, the PowerCast here. Eric, thank you so much for being with us today over here in the car. I know you couldn't be with us in person. I always miss having Eric next to me because he is not only funny, but he's also good looking too. So it always makes it better for the camera. More importantly, thank you everybody for watching. We're going to do now the famous wheel
Thank you for having me.
of who's going to win the tumbler. Let's see who wins today.
I'm reading up now.
Michael House 314 is the
That's a
winner
real
of
tour.
this week's tumbler. Michael House, we are excited to get you a tumbler. Thank you so much for watching the show, everybody. We look forward to having more and more of you watch every week. We've a tremendous amount of guests coming out over the next couple of months, lined up one after the other. Next week is going to be none other than a gentleman by the name of Wesley Eater, who works for a company called Bang. They are one of the #1 edible companies out there you want to know more about. And what edibles do is not just about getting you silly, but more importantly, how to help you not be taking maybe hardcore medications and things you can take into your body to help you feel better. I'm excited about the next show. Thank you so much, Tiffany, for being amazing.
Thank you.
We look forward to seeing you guys again. Please join us on YouTube, Team Powerhouse Real Estate, TikTok, Team Powerhouse Sales, Facebook, Instagram. We love you. We appreciate you guys.